The rain poured heavily that afternoon, turning the wildlife rehabilitation center's gravel parking lot into a maze of puddles. I pulled my thin sweater tighter around my shoulders as I hurried between the kennels for the last check of the day. The smell of wet fur, antiseptic, and pine bedding filled my nose, a scent as familiar to me as my own heartbeat after the 5 years I'd spent working here. Water dripped from the metal roof, the steady rhythm of it creating a melancholy soundtrack that matched my mood. "Just one more, Alara. Then you can go," Dr. Granger called from the office, not bothering to look up from his paperwork. His tone was the same dismissive one he always used with me, the least qualified staff member, the one with only a veterinary assistant certificate, not the proper credentials. The one everyone tolerated but never really respected. "Yes, sir," I replied, my voice barely audible over the pounding rain. I had always been this way, quiet, cautious, living on the fringes. As a child, I'd always preferred the company of injured birds and stray cats to the cruelty of classmates who found my shyness strange and my blonde hair almost ghostly pale. My grandmother had always told me that my gentle hands were a gift that I could soothe pain with just a touch. Before she passed, she had pressed her silver pendant into my palm, a small wolf with amber eyes, which I now wore every day under my scrubs. "Remember, Alara," she had whispered, "strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet choice to be kind when the world expects you to turn away." I touched the pendant through my shirt as I approached the last kennel. The schedule showed it was empty, due for deep cleaning tomorrow. But a sound stopped me in my tracks. A whimper so faint I might have imagined it nearly drowned out by the pounding rain. I peered into the shadows of the concrete enclosure. There, huddled in the far corner on a scrap of blankets someone had forgotten to remove, lay a tiny gray bundle. My heart clenched as I carefully unlocked the door. It was a wolf pup, no more than a few weeks old, trembling violently. Its fur was soaked through, one of its hind legs was twisted at an unnatural angle, and dried blood crusted around a gash on its side. "Oh God," I breathed immediately, dropping to my knees beside the creature. Wolf pups were strictly off-limits at our center. Dr. Granger had made it clear after the controversy last year. No predator species that could jeopardize the center's funding or reputation. Especially not wolves, with all the political tensions surrounding their reintroduction into the local forests. I should call him. I should follow protocol. But when the pup's eyes fluttered open, amber eyes like the ones on my pendant, I knew I couldn't. Those eyes held such pain and fear. But something else too. A desperate will to live that resonated deep within my quiet soul. My hands moved of their own accord, gently lifting the tiny body. The pup was severely hypothermic and dehydrated, probably separated from its mother for days. I glanced toward the office where Dr. Granger was focused on his computer, then back at the suffering creature. In that moment, everything became clear. Follow the rules or follow my heart. I tucked the pup inside my sweater against the warmth of my skin and slipped through the back door to the treatment room. Working quickly, I gathered supplies, warming pads, fluids, antibiotics, and splinting materials. My fingers, usually clumsy under observation, moved with unexpected precision as I established an IV line and slowly raised the pup's temperature. "Stay with me, little one," I whispered, cleaning the wound with gentle strokes. "I've got you now." The leg would need surgery eventually, but for tonight, a temporary splint would have to do. I administered pain medication and antibiotics, prepared a small nest of blankets in one of the recovery crates, and settled the pup inside. For the first time since I'd found it, its breathing steadied and a tiny pink tongue darted out to lick my fingertips. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" The Granger stood in the doorway, his tall frame blocking the exit, face flushed with anger. Behind him, Betrayal from reception peered around his shoulder. Her expression mixed shock with vindictive satisfaction. She'd never liked me. "It's a wolf pup," I said quietly, standing my ground despite the trembling in my knees. "It would have died if I left it. Do you have any idea what you've done?" His voice rose with each word. We have strict policies, Alara. This center operates on county funding and private donations. We can't afford a scandal over wolves, not with half the town wanting them gone. It's just a baby. I argued, my voice stronger than I'd expected. It needed help. It needed to be reported to wildlife services. They handle predator species, not us. He ran a hand through his thinning hair. This is exactly why I hesitated to hire you. You're too emotional, too impulsive. The unfairness of his words stung. In 5 years, I'd never once broken protocol until today. I'd endured every dismissive comment, every overlooked contribution, every time someone else received credit for my ideas. You'll leave the animal here. I'll make the appropriate calls in the morning. His tone left no room for discussion. And Alara, clear out your locker tonight. Your services won't be needed moving forward. The words hit like a physical blow, stealing my breath. My job, the only place I'd ever felt useful, even if never fully valued, was gone in an instant. You can't be serious, I whispered. Over one pup, I couldn't believe it. This isn't just about the wolf. It's about judgment and protocol. We need staff we can trust. He gestured toward the door. You have 30 minutes to collect your things. Brielle's satisfied smirk disappeared as she backed away, no doubt eager to spread the news of my dismissal. Dr. Granger followed, pausing only to add, I'll be in my office. Bring your keycard before you leave. Alone again with the sleeping pup, hot tears streaked down my cheeks. The weight of what I'd done, the sacrifice, crashed over me. My apartment rent was already 2 weeks overdue. Job prospects in this small mountain town were scarce, especially for someone like me with so few qualifications. But as I looked at the tiny creature breathing steadily because of my intervention, I couldn't bring myself to regret my choice. I gently stroked its soft ear, and suddenly the pup turned, nuzzling into my touch. Seeking comfort even in sleep, something fierce and protective bloomed in my chest. I couldn't leave it here to be handed over to wildlife services, where it would likely be euthanized as unsuitable for rehabilitation. The decision formed in my mind with startling clarity. I gathered the pup still nestled in its blankets and slipped it into my backpack, leaving enough space for air circulation. I collected more antibiotics, fluids, and medical supplies, tucking them beside the crate. The theft weighed on my conscience, but I pushed aside the guilt. This wasn't just about breaking rules anymore. It was about saving a life. 30 minutes later, I stood in the pouring rain beside my ancient Honda keycard's surrendered locker, emptied of 5 years' worth of memories. The pup stirred in my backpack as I carefully placed it on the passenger seat. Through the windshield, I caught Dr. Granger watching from the window, his expression unreadable in the gathering darkness. I drove home in silence, the windshield wipers keeping frantic time with my racing thoughts. My small cabin sat at the edge of town, bordered by national forest on 2 sides. A place I'd chosen for its solitude and proximity to nature. Tonight it felt like a refuge. Inside, I transformed my tiny kitchen into a makeshift veterinary unit. The pup whimpered as I rebandaged its wounds and coaxed it to accept water mixed with electrolytes from a dropper. You need a name, I said, gently rubbing its belly as it lay exhausted from the ordeal. How about Ash, for those eyes of yours? Ash responded with a tiny yawn that nearly broke my heart with its innocence. I prepared a nest beside my bed, using an old laundry basket lined with blankets, and settled the pup inside. Tomorrow would bring countless problems. Finding a new job, explaining the missing medical supplies from the center, figuring out how to care for a wild animal. But tonight, I'd made the right choice. Perhaps the first truly brave choice of my life. I fell asleep to the sound of Ash's steady breathing and the distant rumble of thunder rolling away over the mountains. My dreams were filled with amber eyes and forests I'd never seen, places where I ran without fear or hesitation, alongside shapes that moved like shadows through the trees. Morning arrived with startling brightness. The storm had passed, leaving behind the particular mountain clarity that makes every color seem too vivid, too real. I blinked awake, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar weight on my chest. During the night, Ash had somehow climbed out of the basket and curled against me, his tiny body rising and falling with each breath. Reality rushed back: the lost job, the stolen pup, the uncertain future stretching before me. But those concerns seemed distant as Ash stirred, yawning widely to reveal needle-sharp teeth before licking my chin with surprising affection. "Good morning to you too," I murmured carefully, sitting up and cradling him in my arms. The morning check revealed encouraging signs. His temperature was normal, the wound looked cleaner, and he eagerly accepted the formula I'd prepared, according to wildlife rehabilitation guidelines. As I sipped my coffee at the kitchen table, Ash dozing in my lap, a sharp knock at the door sent my heart racing. No one ever visited my cabin, especially not at 7 in the morning. Had Dr. Granger reported the theft already? Were the authorities here to charge me with possession of a protected species? I gently placed Ash in his basket and approached the door, pulse hammering in my throat. Through the peephole I saw not police officers, but a single man, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in dark clothing. His face was partially hidden beneath the brim of a black cap, but his posture tense, almost predatory, made something deep in my gut twist with unease. There was an energy about him that sent a shiver down my spine. My hands shook as I opened the door, just enough to peer out. "Can I help you?" I asked, my voice shaky. The man's gaze locked onto mine, and I was taken aback by his eyes so intensely green they almost glowed against his sun-kissed skin. His dark hair fell across his forehead as he removed his cap, revealing a jagged scar that ran from his left temple down to his jaw. The scar, rather than diminishing his appearance, made him look even more striking, almost dangerously handsome in a way that took my breath away. Ilara Winford. His voice was deep gravelly, like it wasn't used often. I nodded mutely, my grip tightening on the doorframe. "You have something that belongs to me," he stated, voice steady, almost matter-of-fact. I froze, confusion flooding through me as his piercing eyes scanned the inside of my cabin with unnerving intensity. "I don't know what you're talking about," I replied, trying to keep my voice calm. "And how do you know my name?" A smile flickered across his face, quick, like it was gone before I could even register it. "The wolf pup," he said, his tone now firm and deliberate. "I've come for him." A chill ran through my veins. "There's no wolf here," I lied, even as Ash let out a soft whimper from inside, as though intentionally contradicting me. The man's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes darkened, a glimmer of anger appearing. "I can hear him," he said, his voice lowering. "And I can smell the antibiotics and formula you're using." He stepped closer, not threatening, but his presence felt heavy, too intense. "I'm not here to cause trouble, Ilara," he continued. "I just want what's mine." "Yours," I repeated, confusion overtaking my fear. "I found him abandoned at the wildlife center." He explained the words, coming out with barely restrained fury. "He wasn't abandoned. He was taken. His mother was shot by poachers 2 miles north of here 3 days ago." The information hit me like a punch to the gut. They'd killed the mother wolf. Then what? Took her pup as a trophy. My mind raced to piece together how Ash had ended up at the center. "I don't understand," I said, my voice shaking. "How do you know all of this? Who are you?" He paused, considering my question before replying. "My name's Soren Blackwind. I work with the Northern Valley Wolf Conservation Project." Slowly he reached into his jacket, pulling out an ID card with his photo and the project's logo. "I track and protect the local wolf packs." I studied his credentials, still wary, but somewhat reassured. The Northern Valley Project was well known, though controversial. A legitimate organization, respected in conservation circles, but surrounded by politics. "If you work with the Conservation Project, why not go through official channels?" I asked, still confused. "Why not contact the center directly?" A bitter smile crossed his face. "Dr. Granger and I have a complicated history. He doesn't believe in our work." If I'd gone to him officially, that pup would have been euthanized before I could intervene. His eyes met mine directly, and I knew he was right. He'd figured it out. He knew exactly why I'd taken Ash. Just like you knew this would happen, which is why you took him. His words struck me, and I felt a lump in my throat. How did you find me? I asked, still trying to wrap my mind around it. Small town, he shrugged. Word travels. Someone at the center mentioned a blonde woman who got fired for helping a wolf pup. Not many cabins out this way. Behind me, Ash whimpered again, louder this time. Soren's attention immediately shifted, and his entire demeanor changed, softening. Please, he said, his voice gentle for the first time. Let me see him. If you care about his welfare, you'll want my help. He needs specialized care. Something in his plea resonated with me, the same part of me that had risked everything to save Ash in the first place. I hesitated, then opened the door wider. He's injured, I said, stepping back to let him in. His back leg is broken, and he has a deep gash on his side. I've stabilized him, but... I trailed off, watching as Soren knelt beside Ash's basket. The transformation in him was striking. The man who had seemed so intense and dangerous moments before now focused entirely on the pup. His hands surprisingly delicate as they carefully examined the tiny body. You did this, Splint? He asked, inspecting my work. I nodded, suddenly feeling self-conscious. I'm a veterinary assistant. Well, was. Good work, he said, his tone changing to one of respect. Most people wouldn't know how to treat hypovolemic shock in a wolf pup. Clean bandaging, too. He looked up at me, a flicker of respect in his eyes. Most people wouldn't know how to treat hypovolemic shock in a wolf pup. He would have died without intervention, I said quietly. A rush of unexpected pride heated my cheeks at the praise. He still needs proper surgery for that leg. Yes. Soren gently lifted Ash, who, to my surprise, nuzzled into the man's palm. I know someone who can help. A veterinarian who works with our project. I watched the interaction, a mix of emotions swirling inside me. The pup clearly recognized Soren's scent, responding to him with none of the fear he had shown toward others. But the thought of handing Ash over to this stranger, no matter how qualified, made a hollow ache bloom in my chest. You've named him Soren, observed, his voice soft as he watched Ash respond to me. Just temporarily, I said quickly, not wanting to overstep. I know he's not a pet. Soren studied me for a long moment, his eyes thoughtful. No, he's not. But he's not entirely wild either. Not anymore. Not after being handled by humans at such a critical age. He stroked Ash's head with his thumb. The pack won't accept him now, even if his injuries heal. His words hit me like a weight. What will happen to him then? Normally he'd be placed in a conservation center. Soren continued, his expression troubled. But spaces are limited, and a pup with this level of injury... He trailed off, the unspoken implication clear. They prioritize animals with the best chance of recovery or breeding potential. So he'll be euthanized. I finished, the unfairness of it burning in my throat. After everything, he'll still die just because humans decided he's inconvenient. Soren's green eyes flashed with empathy, unexpected but welcome. Not necessarily. He hesitated, then continued, his voice low and steady. There's another option. I have a property deeper in the forest. I rehabilitate wolves that can't return to the wild, mostly older animals, or those too habituated to humans. He glanced down at Ash, who seemed to be listening intently, even in his weakened state. I could take him there. Hope flared inside me, sudden and bright. He'd live. Soren nodded. It's not an easy life. He'd never run fully wild, but yes, he'd live. He focused on me again, his gaze assessing. The first few months are critical, though. He needs round-the-clock care, specialized feeding. I understood what he wasn't saying. You need help. I need someone with medical training who isn't afraid of wolves, Soren said with a faint smile. Someone who'd risk their career to save a pup. The implication hit me hard. Was he offering me a job? Before I could respond, my phone rang, breaking the silence. I excused myself and answered. It was Mrs. Rain from the town's only veterinary clinic. Alara, she greeted me, skipping the pleasantries. I heard what happened at the wildlife center. Dr. Granger is an old fool. She didn't stop there. Listen, one of our assistants just gave notice. The pay's not much, but if you're interested, it's steady work in your field. A chance to stay in the town you've called home for years. I thanked her profusely and promised to call back within the hour. When I returned to Soren, he was feeding Ash with a dropper. His expression was softer than I'd seen it yet. He looked up, and I could see that something in my face had revealed the nature of the call. Good news, he asked. A job offer. At the vet clinic in town, I said, twisting my hands together. It's what I need right now. Soren nodded, his face unreadable. Of course. A practical choice. He began gathering Ash's supplies. I should get him to the surgeon today, if that leg is going to heal properly. Reality crashed back in waves. He was taking Ash away. The pup would go to some remote cabin with this man I had just met, and I'd probably never see him again. The thought was like a physical ache in my chest, surprising in its intensity. Wait, I said impulsively. Your conservation work. Is it a paid position? Soren looked up, surprise flickering across his face. Yes, though barely. It's mostly grant funding, mostly seasonal. He continued, his voice steady. And you said you needed help, with Ash and the other wolves. Understanding flickered in his eyes. It's nothing like working at a proper clinic. The cabin is isolated. The work is demanding, unconventional. He studied me carefully. Most people wouldn't consider it. I'm not most people, I replied, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. The truth of that statement hit me just as hard as it seemed to hit him. I had never truly fit in town anyway. Silence stretched between us, filled with unspoken questions and possibilities. Finally, Soren spoke. The job requires living on site. There's a small guest cabin. Basic but comfortable enough. My heart raced with the weight of what I was considering. Leaving my home, turning down secure employment, moving to the wilderness with a near stranger to care for injured wolves. It felt reckless, impulsive, completely unlike me. Or was it, maybe this was exactly who I'd always been beneath the quiet exterior? Someone willing to follow her convictions even into uncertain territory. I'd need to see this place first, I said, my voice steady. Meet the other wolves. Understand what I'd be getting into. Soren's expression shifted, something like respect flickering in his eyes. Fair enough. I can take you there, today, after we get Ash to the surgeon. He held my gaze. But Alara, if you're serious, you should know this isn't a temporary position. Wolves form attachments. Once Ash bonds with you as his caretaker, separating him would be traumatic. The weight of his words settled on me, heavy and undeniable. This wasn't just a job. It was a profound responsibility to a creature who would depend on me completely. I understand, I whispered, the enormity of it all sinking in. Outside, the clouds began to gather once again, casting moving shadows across the cabin floor. I packed a small bag with essentials, then called Mrs. Rain to politely decline her offer. Within the hour, I found myself sitting next to Soren in his rugged Land Rover Ash, nestled safely in a carrier between us. We drove in silence for a while, following Forest Service roads that led deeper into the mountains than I'd ever ventured. The landscape grew wilder, the human imprint gradually receding with each mile. I stared out the window, watching ancient pines and rocky ridges pass by, wondering what lay ahead. Why wolves? I finally asked my curiosity about the scarred, intense man beside me, getting the better of me. Soren kept his eyes on the difficult road. They're misunderstood, feared without reason, hunted without mercy. His knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. People only see teeth and threat. They don't see the intelligence, the family bonds, the essential role in the ecosystem. You speak like someone with a personal connection. I observed, noting the tightness in his jaw. Soren paused for a moment before answering. My father was a Arapaho. In our stories, wolves are teachers, guides. He navigated around a fallen branch. When I was 12, I found a wolf caught in a poacher's trap. I tried to free it myself and got this from my trouble. He gestured toward the jagged scar on his face. But the wolf could have killed me, and didn't. Even in its pain and fear, it showed more restraint than the men who set the trap. I absorbed his words, beginning to understand the passion that drove him. Did you save it? I asked softly. The trapped wolf, no, he said flatly. By the time I returned with help, the poachers had found it first. The brutal honesty of his answer silenced me. We continued driving the road, narrowing further until we turned onto a nearly invisible track that wound through dense forest. After another 20 minutes, the trees parted to reveal a clearing, and in its center stood a sturdy log cabin. Behind it, a smaller structure, presumably the guest quarters he had mentioned. The property was nestled against a sheer cliff face, mountains rising in every direction. We're here, Soren said, parking near the main cabin. The vet will meet us in about an hour. As I stepped out of the vehicle, the stillness of the place hit me first. No traffic, no human voices, just the wind rustling through the pines and distant bird calls. The air was different here, cleaner, sharper, filling my lungs with a sense of wild freedom. Then I heard it howls rising from behind the cabin, a chorus that sent a thrill down my spine. The sound, though not threatening, carried a wild power that seemed to echo in some ancient part of me. The wolves knew we were here. They can smell ash, Soren said, standing beside me. And you. I looked toward the sound. How many wolves do you have? 5 adults currently. All with stories similar to what Ash might have faced. He gestured toward a large, fenced enclosure I hadn't noticed at first, tucked away behind the land's contour. They have 10 acres to roam with heated shelters for winter. It's not freedom, but it's the best alternative. As if responding to his voice, a large gray wolf appeared at the edge of the enclosure, watching us with intelligent eyes. One by one, others joined until 5 pairs of eyes studied us intently. They're beautiful, I whispered, mesmerized by their presence. Ash stirred in his carrier, responding to the howls with a tiny experimental yip of his own. The sound was so earnest, so full of recognition, that I felt tears pricking at my eyes. Soren noticed. Second thoughts, he asked quietly. I glanced at the wild beauty of the adult wolves, and then back at the injured pup we'd rescued. I turned to the scarred man beside me, the one who had brought me to this remote place that somehow felt more right than anywhere I'd been before. No, I said with unexpected certainty. No second thoughts at all. As promised, the veterinarian arrived, Dr. Rhea Wilder. Her silver-streaked hair and no-nonsense movements spoke of decades of experience. She examined Ash thoroughly, using Rowan's kitchen table as an impromptu operating space. Good initial care, she asked, glancing at me approvingly. Kept him alive when most wouldn't have managed it. Her surgical work was swift and precise as she repaired Ash's leg with a proper pin. I assisted, falling into the familiar rhythm of passing instruments and monitoring vital signs. Throughout the procedure, Soren stood nearby, steady and watchful. He'll need 6 weeks at least before putting weight on that leg, Dr. Wilder explained, as she finished bandaging. Daily physical therapy after the first 2 weeks. Antibiotics for 10 days. She handed me detailed instructions. You're staying to help, I take it? Yes, I answered, surprising myself with how natural the decision felt, at least through his recovery. Dr. Wilder's experienced eyes flicked between Soren and me. Good. He needs both of you now. After she left, we settled Ash in a warm nest near the wood stove in Soren's cabin. The pup, drowsy from the medication, curled into sleep with a contented sigh. I found myself reluctant to leave his side even for a moment. You should see where you'll be staying, Soren said, and meet the others properly. The guest cabin was small but thoughtfully arranged. A cozy main room with a kitchenette and a sitting area. A bedroom with a pine frame bed and a simple bathroom with surprisingly modern fixtures. Large windows faced the forest, filling the space with soft, dappled light. It's perfect, I said, genuinely pleased with the simplicity and warmth of it. Soren nodded, a slight relief in his gaze. The main cabin has better medical supplies and a satellite phone for emergencies. Cell reception is non-existent here. The isolation might have unsettled me once, but now it felt like a shield between this new life and the judgments of the world I'd left behind. Come on, Soren said, his voice soft. There's someone else you should meet. He led me to the wolf enclosure, unlocking a heavy gate that opened into a small transition area. Wait here, he instructed. Let them approach you. Soren entered the main enclosure alone, and I watched in awe as the wolves greeted him, not as pets would, but as equals. They circled around him, sniffing his hands, his clothes. One even rose to place its paws briefly on his shoulders, in what looked like an embrace. He spoke to them in low, rumbling tones, words I couldn't distinguish, but they seemed to calm and center the pack. After several minutes, Soren gestured for me to move closer. My heart hammered in my chest as I stepped into the transition area, now only separated from 5 full-grown wolves by a single fence. They approached cautiously, their noses working to capture my scent. The black one with the white chest is Kaya, the alpha female, Soren explained quietly. The large gray beside her is Sage, her mate. The others are Dakota Riven and Vera. Kaya studied me with intelligent amber eyes, so much like Ash's. I wondered if they were somehow related. She moved closer to the fence, her gaze never leaving mine. Don't stare directly at her, Soren advised. It's a challenge. Look slightly away, then back. I followed his guidance, lowering my gaze and turning my head slightly. When I looked back, Kaya had come right up to the fence, her nose just nearly touching the wire. She inhaled deeply and let out a soft sound from her throat. She smells ash on you, Soren said, surprise evident in his tone. She's accepting you. The other wolves followed their alpha's lead, cautiously approaching me with varying degrees of curiosity. None of them showed aggression, though Riven, a reddish-brown wolf with a limp, kept his distance, watching me warily from beneath a pine tree. Riven was caught in a trap, like the wolf. From my childhood, Soren explained, following my gaze. Except I got to him in time. He'll never fully trust humans, but he tolerates me. And the others, what are their stories? Soren's expression darkened slightly as he spoke. Kaya was raised illegally as an exotic pet, then abandoned when she grew too large to control. Sage was shot and left for dead by a farmer. Dakota and Vera were born in captivity on a fur farm. When they were rescued, they were too habituated to humans to be released. Each story twisted something deep in my chest. The cruelty inflicted by my own kind. The resilience of these beautiful creatures who still found a way to trust. Soren unlocked the inner gate. Come in. Slowly. I hesitated, instinctual fear warring with my trust in his judgment. Are you sure Kaya has decided? He replied, his green eyes steady. The others will follow her lead. Trust goes both ways, Alara. Taking a deep breath, I stepped into the enclosure. The wolves circled me cautiously, sniffing my clothes, my hands, my hair. I remained still, allowing them to investigate at their own pace. Kaya came closest, her warm breath tickling my palm as she scented me thoroughly. They can sense fear, Soren said softly. But they also recognize compassion. What you did for Ash, risking everything to save him, that matters to them. As if understanding his words, Kaya pressed her muzzle briefly against my hand, then turned and loped away toward the trees. The others followed, melting into the shadows of the forest until only Soren and I remained in the clearing. That went better than I expected, he admitted, locking the gate behind us. Kaya doesn't usually accept strangers so quickly. Pride warmed my chest at having earned the Alpha's approval. They're incredible. Yes, Soren agreed. And much misunderstood, like many things that people fear simply because they don't understand. Back in the main cabin, Ash had woken up and was softly whining for attention. I went straight to him, checking his bandages and offering him some water. He licked my fingers weakly, but seemed comfortable enough, the pain medication doing its job. You have a natural way with him, Soren observed, watching me from the doorway. Most people handle wolf pups either too tentatively or too roughly. You find the middle ground. The compliment pleased me more than it should have. My grandmother always said I had a gift for soothing hurt creatures. I touched the wolf pendant beneath my shirt, a habit whenever I thought of her. She'd have loved this place. You mentioned her before, Soren said. She taught you about animals, among other things. I smiled at the memory. She lived on the edge of town, kept mostly to herself. People called her eccentric, but to me, she was just wise. She sounds like someone who understood balance, Soren said thoughtfully. Humans have forgotten. We're just one part of a larger whole. The conversation flowed easily as evening approached. Soren prepared a simple meal of venison stew, and we ate at the worn kitchen table while discussing Ash's care schedule. Despite the circumstances and the short time I'd known him, I felt a strange sense of comfort in Soren's presence. His directness, his lack of pretense. As darkness fell, the wolves began to howl again, their voices rising and falling in a haunting, complex harmony. Ash stirred at the sound, his tiny head lifting as if straining to understand the call of his kind. They're saying good night, Soren explained, a rare smile softening his features. They do this at dusk and dawn. We listened in silence, the eerie melody filling the cabin. For the first time in years, maybe ever, I felt truly present, connected to something ancient, something powerful. I should get back to my cabin, I said eventually. Though reluctant to leave, it's been a long day. Soren nodded. I'll keep Ash here tonight so I can monitor him. Tomorrow we'll set up a proper rotation for his care. I gathered my few belongings and paused at the door. Thank you, I said softly, for trusting me with all this. He replied simply, You earned that trust. Not many would have done what you did. In the guest cabin, I prepared for sleep in the unfamiliar surroundings, the sounds of the nighttime forest filtering through the partially open window. The weight of the day's events crashed over me, my lost job, the injured pup, this unexpected new path. By all logic, I should have been terrified. Instead, I felt a strange serenity, like I'd stumbled into exactly where I was meant to be. Sleep came easily, deep and dreamless, until the early hours when a strange sound outside my window woke me. Pulling on a sweater to ward off the mountain chill, I peered out into the gray half-light. Kaya stood in the clearing between the cabins, her black fur tinged silver by the approaching dawn. Her amber eyes locked onto mine. When she saw me, she made that same soft sound I'd heard earlier. Then she turned to looking pointedly at Soren's cabin before meeting my gaze again. Understanding bloomed in me instinctively. She was checking on Ash, using me as an intermediary. I nodded to her, whispering, He's safe, I promise. As if satisfied, she disappeared back into the forest, just as the first light touched the eastern mountains. I dressed quickly, driven by both concern for Ash and a strange sense of responsibility to report to Kaya. When I reached the main cabin, Soren was already awake, tending to Ash while coffee brewed on the ancient stove. The pup looked better this morning. He was alert, his eyes brighter as he eagerly accepted the formula I prepared. Kaya came to my window before dawn, I told Soren as we worked. It seemed like she was asking about Ash. Soren looked up sharply. At your window. Outside the enclosure. My hand froze. Yes, is that unusual? I asked. The enclosure is secure, he replied, his brow furrowing as he checked Ash's bandages. I'll need to inspect the fencing. She wasn't aggressive, I assured him. Just concerned. Soren's expression remained troubled. Wolves are incredible escape artists when motivated. If she's identified Ash as part of her pack, she might go to extraordinary lengths to reach him. After breakfast, Soren left to check the enclosure while I stayed with Ash. The pup was growing stronger by the hour, his natural resilience asserting itself now that his injuries were properly treated. I found myself talking to him constantly, telling him stories about my grandmother, about the town I'd left behind, about the strange twists of fate that had brought us together. "You've changed everything, little one," I murmured as he dozed off against my chest. "I don't even recognize my life anymore." The sound of the door opening interrupted my thoughts. Soren stood there, his expression unreadable. "Did you find where she got out?" I asked. He shook his head slowly. "The enclosure is completely secure. No breaks, no dig spots, nothing." "But then how—" "I don't know." He ran a hand through his dark hair, leaving it charmingly disheveled. "In 7 years, none of them have ever escaped. It's like she simply—" He trailed off, seemingly unwilling to voice the impossible. A shiver ran through me. "What aren't you telling me?" Soren's green eyes met mine directly. "There are things about this place, about Kaya, that I don't fully understand myself." He hesitated. "The locals have stories, old legends about wolves that aren't entirely wolf." His words hung in the air between us, heavy with implications I wasn't sure I was ready to consider. Before I could press him for details, Ash whimpered in my arms, pulling me back to the immediate concerns. "Whatever Kaya is or isn't, she seems to care about him," I said, focusing on the practical. "And about us. Or she wouldn't have come to check." Soren studied me for a moment, his gaze assessing. Maybe he was figuring out if I was dismissing his concerns or just prioritizing the immediate needs. Finally, he nodded. "Yes. Her behavior suggests protection, not threat." He moved to the window, gazing out at the enclosure, visible in the distance. "Still, I'd like you to tell me if you see her or any of them outside again." The days settled into a steady rhythm after that morning. Ash's care shaped our hours, medications, bandage changes, feeding schedules. I slept in the guest cabin, but spent most of my daylight hours in the main house where we had set up a recovery area for the pup. Soren continued his conservation work, sometimes disappearing into the forest for hours to check trail cameras or track wolf movements. But he always returned by dusk. I learned that Soren's gruff exterior hid a deeply thoughtful nature. He rarely spoke about his past, but occasionally he shared stories of the years he spent learning, tracking from his Arapaho grandfather, or his formal education in wildlife biology. He read voraciously, his cabin filled with books on ecology, animal behavior, and native mythology. In the evenings, he often wrote detailed field notes. While I tended to Ash, the comfortable silence between us, broken only by the pup's contented sounds and the crackling of the fire. 2 weeks passed this way, each day strengthening not only Ash, but also the strange bond that was forming between Soren and me. We moved around each other with growing familiarity, anticipating needs, and sharing observations about Ash's progress without needing many words. The morning Ash first put weight on his injured leg, we celebrated like proud parents. The pup took 3 wobbly steps before tumbling sideways, looking so indignant at the betrayal of his own body that we both burst into laughter. "He has your determination," Soren said, his green eyes crinkling at the corners. "And your stubbornness," I countered, enjoying the rare sound of his full laugh. Dr. Rhea Wilder visited twice more each time, pronouncing herself satisfied with Ash's healing. "You two make a good team," she observed during her final checkup, her knowing gaze shifting between Soren and me. Heat rose to my cheeks at the unintended compliment. As Ash grew stronger, Soren suggested we begin introducing him to the adult wolves through the fence of the transition area. "He needs to learn wolf language," Soren explained. "Even if he can't live fully wild, he should know his own kind." I carried Ash to the enclosure nervous despite Soren's assurances. The adult wolves approached cautiously, Kaya at the front as always. The alpha female pressed herself against the fenced nostrils, flaring as she scented the pup. Ash squirmed in my arms, letting out high-pitched yips that made Kaya's ears prick forward. To my astonishment, she answered with a soft huffing sound. Ash responded immediately, his little tail wagging so hard his whole body wiggled. "They're communicating," Soren said softly, awe in his voice. "Kaya recognizes him. How is that possible? They've never met." Soren shook his head as mystified as I was. "Wolves have recognition systems we don't fully understand. Scent markers, vocal patterns, or something else entirely." Every day after that, we brought Ash to the transition area for these strange interspecies conversations. All the adult wolves showed interest, but Kaya's connection with Ash was unmistakable. She would lie for hours against the fence while Ash mirrored her position on our side, their bodies separated by wire but somehow deeply attuned to each other. "I think she's teaching him," Soren observed one afternoon, watching as Kaya demonstrated what looked like a greeting ritual which Ash promptly attempted to copy. The realization that Ash would eventually move from our care to the enclosure brought an unexpected ache to my chest. I had known from the start this wasn't a permanent arrangement, yet I'd grown attached to his warm weight against my heart at night. His excited greetings every morning. Soren seemed to read my thoughts. "It won't be for several more weeks," he said gently. "And even then, you'll still see him every day." I nodded, unable to trust myself to speak. His hand briefly found mine, a warm pressure that conveyed understanding before pulling away. That night I dreamed of running through moonlit forests, the wind pulling my hair, the earth cool beneath my feet. Dream Kaya ran beside me, guiding me deeper into ancient woods where shadows moved with purpose and the boundaries between species seemed to blur. I woke with a sensation of pine needles against my skin and the lingering scent of wolf in my nostrils. The dream felt more like memory than fantasy, disorienting in its vividness. I rose and went to the window, drawn by some instinct I couldn't name. The full moon illuminated the clearing between the cabins with silver light, and there stood Kaya exactly as she had appeared in my dream. Our eyes met across the distance, and a strange understanding passed between us, an acknowledgement of shared secrets. This time I wasn't surprised by Kaya's presence outside the enclosure. Somehow I'd expected it. Without fear, I stepped onto the porch of the guest cabin. Kaya watched me steadily, then turned her gaze toward the forest's edge. Looking back at me with a clear invitation, common sense told me to wake Soren to report this strange behavior. But instead I found myself following the black wolf across the moonlit clearing, heading toward the tree line. Kaya moved unhurriedly, pausing occasionally to ensure I was still following. My rational mind screamed questions. How was she free? Where was she leading me? Why wasn't I afraid? But a deeper instinct kept me moving forward. We walked for what felt like 15 minutes, following what seemed to be a game trail winding through dense pines. The forest opened suddenly into a small meadow bathed in moonlight. At its center stood an ancient oak, its massive trunk speaking of centuries of growth. Kaya led me directly to the tree. Then she sat beside what I now saw was a hollow space among its roots. She looked at me expectantly, intelligence burning in her amber eyes. I knelt beside the hollow, uncertain what I was meant to find. Reaching cautiously into the space, my fingers brushed against something cool and smooth, a stone perfectly round and polished about the size of my palm. When I withdrew it, the moonlight revealed its deep amber color, so similar to Kaya's eyes, to Ash's eyes, to the eyes of the wolf pendant I wore. Kaya made a soft sound of approval. Then, to my absolute shock, she spoke not in words, but in a thought that formed fully in my mind with unmistakable clarity. "Guardian." I dropped the stone, scrambling backward. "This isn't possible," I whispered. Kaya didn't move, her gaze steady on mine. Again that voice, that wasn't a voice, filled my thoughts. "You wear the mark. You save the pup. You are chosen. My hand flew to my grandmother's pendant. I don't understand. Your blood remembers even if you do not. Before I could ask more, a distant call broke the silence. Soren's voice shouting my name. The spell shattered, and Kaya was simply a wolf again, slipping silently into the forest shadows as Soren's footsteps crashed through the underbrush. He burst into the clearing flashlight beam, dancing wildly until it found me. Alara relief and anger warred in his voice. What are you doing out here alone? I stood the amber stone clenched tightly in my fist. Kaya, I managed. She led me here. His expression shifted from anger to concern. Kaya is in the enclosure. I checked before coming to look for you. That's not possible. She was just here. I pointed to where the wolf had sat moments before. Soren's flashlight revealed nothing but undisturbed grass. He approached slowly, as if worried about my mental state. Alara, you were sleepwalking. It happens in these mountains sometimes, the altitude, the isolation. I wasn't sleepwalking, I insisted, opening my hand to show him the stone. She wanted me to find this. The amber stone caught the flashlight beam, glowing with an inner fire. Soren stared at it, then at me, his expression unreadable in the harsh light. Where did you get that? His voice dropped to a whisper. In the tree hollow, Kaya showed me. I gestured to the ancient oak. Soren played his light over the tree, revealing the hollow among its roots. His hand trembled slightly as he turned back to me. We need to go back to the cabin now, he said urgently, silencing my protests with the force of his tone. We walked in intense silence, Soren constantly scanning the forest around us. Only when we were safely inside the main cabin, Ash stirring sleepily at the disturbance, did he speak again. The stone you found is called Amber's Heart in local legends, he said, examining it in the lamplight. It's said to belong to the guardian of the boundary between human and wolf worlds. I sank into a chair, the events of the night catching up with me. I don't believe in fairy tales, Soren. Neither did I, he said quietly, until I came to these mountains. He set the stone carefully on the table between us. The local tribes have stories about wolf walkers, humans who could take wolf form who served as intermediaries between the two species. They were marked by amber eyes, regardless of which form they wore. Like Kaya's eyes, I whispered. Like Ash's, he added, gesturing to my grandmother's pendant which had slipped outside my nightshirt during our trek through the forest. My fingers closed around the silver wolf with its amber eyes. My grandmother said it was a family heirloom, I said softly, that it would guide me when I needed direction. I looked up at Soren. But that's just the kind of thing grandmothers say. Maybe he said sitting across from me. Or maybe she knew more than she told you. The women in these stories were often the strongest wolf walkers, the guardians of old knowledge. I remembered my grandmother's affinity for animals, her uncanny weather predictions, her comfortable solitude at the forest's edge. Could there have been more to her wisdom than I'd understood as a child? Kaya spoke to me. I admitted the words sounding absurd, even as I said them. Not aloud, but in my mind. She called me guardian and said my blood remembers. Instead of the skepticism I expected, Soren's expression showed only solemn acceptance. I've suspected something unusual about your connection with Ash. Since that first day, he leaned forward, his voice quiet. When Kaya accepted you immediately. He paused, his gaze locking onto mine. And there's something I haven't told you about Ash. What? My heart quickened with sudden apprehension. The poachers who killed his mother, they weren't just any hunters. They were specifically targeting that pack because of local rumors about wolves that weren't entirely wolf. Soren met my gaze directly. Ash's pack was Kaya's original family, her birth pack. But you said she was raised in captivity, I said, confused. That's what her rescue records showed, he confirmed. But I've always had questions. She appeared suddenly near town 7 years ago, injured but not feral like a truly wild wolf. Too comfortable around humans to be wild. too skilled in wolf ways to be just a captive. The implications of his words settled on me like a heavy weight. You think she's... I think the legends have a basis in truth, Soren said carefully. And I think you and Kaya share a connection that goes beyond ordinary human-animal bonds. Dawn found us still at the kitchen table, the amber stone between us. Mugs of cold coffee sat forgotten as we pieced together possibilities neither of us had been ready to consider. Ash slept peacefully nearby, unaware of the revelations reshaping our understanding of his place in this strange story. And mine. My grandmother used to say that the world is full of old magic we've forgotten how to see, I said, watching the early light play across the stone surface. I always thought she was being poetic. The boundary between poetry and truth is thinner than we realize, Soren replied. He reached across the table, hesitating before covering my hand with his. Are you afraid? The question made me pause. By all logic, I should be terrified of Kaya's impossible freedom of voices in my mind, of ancient legends suddenly intersecting with reality. Yet what I felt wasn't fear, but recognition. As if pieces of myself long scattered were finally aligning. No, I answered truthfully. I'm curious, and maybe a little overwhelmed. Soren's smile was gentle. That's a saner response than mine was when I first encountered things I couldn't explain. His thumb traced a small circle on my wrist. The casual intimacy of the gesture made my pulse quicken. What will you do now? The question hung between us, heavy with unspoken implications. I had come here temporarily to help with Ash's recovery. That task was nearly complete. Logic dictated I should return to town, find another job, resume my quiet existence. Yet the thought felt hollow, like contemplating a return to a half-life I had outgrown. I don't know, I admitted. But I'm not ready to leave. I turned my hand beneath his, our fingers intertwining naturally. Not yet. Something shifted in his expression, relief perhaps, or hope. Before he could respond, a familiar howl rose from the direction of the enclosure. Kaya's morning greeting joined moments later by the other wolves. Ash stirred at the sound, raising his head and answering with his strongest howl yet. A tiny but determined voice joining the chorus of his kin. The sound struck a chord deep within me. It resonated with something that felt like belonging. I need to understand what's happening, I said gently. Disentangling my fingers from Soren's, to lift Ash for his morning feeding. If my grandmother was connected to these legends, if I am somehow part of them, I need to know. I've collected local stories for years, Soren offered. Books recorded oral histories from tribal elders. I never thought they might have practical application. He rose, stretching muscles stiff from our all-night conversation. We should sleep, then look through them together. We separated to our respective cabins, though sleep proved elusive despite my exhaustion. My mind circled endlessly around the impossible events of the night, around my grandmother's cryptic comments over the years, around the strange sense of rightness I felt in this remote place with Soren, Ash, and the wolves. When I finally rose in the late afternoon, I found Soren on the porch of the main cabin. Surrounded by books and notebooks, Ash lay beside him in a patch of sunlight, his splinted leg extended as he dozed. I've been reviewing everything I have on wolfwalkers, Soren said as I joined him, handing me a steaming mug of coffee. The stories vary, but certain elements remain consistent. I settled beside him, our shoulders brushing lightly as he showed me his research. According to the legends, wolfwalkers were born, not made. The ability passed through bloodlines, often strongest in female descendants, he explained. They served as bridges between human and wolf societies, understanding both worlds and maintaining balance between them. The amber stone, Amber's heart, was said to amplify these innate abilities, allowing deeper communication and, in some versions of the legend, full transformation. The stories say the gift often skips generations. Soren continued, pointing to his notes. A grandmother might show the signs while her children live ordinary human lives. Then a grandchild is born with amber eyes or an unusual affinity for wolves. I thought of my mother's pragmatic nature, how she'd always seemed embarrassed by my grandmother's superstitious nonsense, how she'd tried to raise me to be practical sensible. Everything my grandmother was not. I've never shifted into a wolf, Soren, I said, needing to ground this conversation in reality. I think I'd remember something like that. Soren nodded. The legends suggest it's not always a physical transformation. Sometimes it's a mental connection. The ability to understand wolves, to be understood by them, to dream their dreams. He studied my face. Like you did last night. I couldn't deny it, the dream had felt different. More vivid, more real than ordinary dreams. And then, there was Kaya's voice in my mind, clear as speech. We should talk to Dr. Wilder, I suggested. She seems to know more about this place than she lets on. Soren nodded. She comes from one of the oldest families in the region. If anyone has insights beyond what I've collected, it would be her. Dr. Rhea Wilder arrived the following day ostensibly to check on Ash's progress. After examining the pup, she settled at the kitchen table where I had placed the amber stone. She didn't seem surprised. I wondered if this would find its way back, she said, touching it lightly. It appears when needed, then disappears for generations. You know what it is? I asked. My great-grandmother was the keeper of the stories. Dr. Wilder replied, her voice quiet, yet full of knowledge, including those about a woman with pale hair and a gift for healing who lived between worlds. They said when she wore the stone, wolves would speak to her, and the forest itself would guide her steps. My hand went instinctively to my grandmother's pendant. My grandmother left her hometown as a young woman. She never spoke of her family there. Many did during those years, Dr. Wilder said gently, her weathered hand covering mine briefly. When the old ways were ridiculed, when connection to wolves meant persecution. But blood remembers even when minds forget. The stone finding you is no accident, Alara. What am I supposed to do with it? I asked, the weight of inherited responsibility settling over me. That depends on what you want, she replied simply. The gift can be denied. Many have turned away from it, chosen ordinary lives. I thought of my job at the wildlife center, safe, predictable, always feeling slightly apart from others. Had that separation been just my natural introversion? Or was it something deeper? Had I always been meant for a different path? And if I don't turn away? I asked. Dr. Wilder smiled. Then you learn. You listen. You become the bridge your blood has prepared you to be. Her eyes moved between Soren and me, with the right support, of course. After she left, Soren and I took Ash for his now daily visit to the transition area. The pup had grown noticeably in the week since his rescue, his movements more coordinated, his personality emerging, curious, determined, affectionate. He approached the fence, eagerly greeting Kaya with familiar yips and body language they'd developed together. He'll be ready to join them soon, Soren said, watching the interaction with obvious pride. Another few weeks to ensure the leg is fully healed, I replied. The thought no longer brought the same pang of loss. Ash would move from our direct care, but he wouldn't be leaving us. Not really. He would simply be expanding his family to include both the human and wolf worlds he bridged, much like I might be doing myself. I reached into my pocket, feeling the smooth contour of the amber stone. On impulse, I took it out, holding it in my palm as I watched Kaya and Ash communicate through the fence. The change was subtle at first, heightened senses, smells becoming richer, sounds more distinct. Then Kaya turned to look directly at me, and again I heard that voice, not a voice, but a presence in my mind. Sister. This time I didn't pull away from the connection. Instead, I leaned into it, allowing my thoughts to form in response. I'm trying to understand. Understanding comes with time. Trust comes first. I felt Soren tense beside me, watching the silent exchange that he could see but not hear. I reached for his hand, anchoring myself to his solid presence as I navigated this strange new terrain. Can you show me? I asked Kaya, not entirely sure what I was requesting. In response, a flood of images filled my mind, forests seen through different eyes. Senses categorized in ways human language couldn't express. The complex social bonds of pack life rendered in emotional colors, not words. The sheer alienness of it should have been terrifying. Yet beneath the wolf's perspective was something familiar. The same love of family, the need for belonging, and the joy in the natural world that formed the core of human experience. When the connection faded, I found myself leaning heavily against Soren, his arm wrapping around my waist, supporting me. Alara, concern edged his voice. What happened? She showed me how she sees the world. I whispered, still processing the experience. It was beautiful. Different, but familiar. We walked back to the cabin in thoughtful silence, Ash trotting happily between us. His limp was barely noticeable now. Inside, I placed the amber stone on the mantel as Soren built a fire against the evening chill. What are you thinking? He asked, settling beside me on the worn sofa. That I've spent my life feeling like I didn't quite fit anywhere? I answered honestly. Maybe this is why. Maybe I was meant to belong in both worlds, not just one. Soren's hand found mine again, his calloused palm warm against my skin. And where do you want to belong now? The question hung between us, holding an unspoken one that made my heart race. I turned to face him, fully taking in the strong lines of his face softened by the firelight, the scar that spoke of his own connection to wolves. The green eyes that had watched me with increasing tenderness these past weeks. Here, I said simply, with the wolves. With Ash, I took a breath, gathering courage with you if you want that too. His answer wasn't in words, but in the gentle press of his lips against mine, a kiss that felt like both a homecoming and a new beginning woven together. When we parted, his forehead rested against mine, our breath mingling. I've been alone a long time, he murmured. Caught between worlds myself in a different way. Never quite human enough for the town. Never quite able to leave human concerns behind. His fingers traced my cheek. Then you arrived, risking everything for a wolf pup, and suddenly the divide didn't seem so insurmountable. We make a good team. I smiled against his palm, echoing Dr. Wilder's words. The wolf walker and the wolf protector. Is that what you're choosing? Then he asked. This life, I thought of my grandmother's words. Strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet choice to be kind when the world expects you to turn away. I'd made that choice with Ash, not knowing it would lead me here to this moment of decision that felt less like choosing a new path and more like recognizing the one I'd been walking all along. Yes, I answered, though I think it might have chosen me first. 6 months later, I stood at the edge of the enlarged enclosure watching Ash run with the pack. His injured leg had healed completely, leaving only the slightest hitch in his stride when he was tired. Kaya had accepted him fully as I'd known she would, teaching him wolf ways while allowing him to maintain his connection with Soren and me. The conservation project had expanded under our joint leadership. My medical training complemented Soren's tracking expertise, allowing us to monitor the local wild packs more effectively. Dr. Wilder had introduced us to sympathetic officials who valued our work, securing additional funding that helped us expand to assist during the busier seasons. In town, I was now known as the Wolf Woman, a title that might have once embarrassed me, but now I wore it with quiet pride. Children brought injured animals to our monthly clinic, listening wide-eyed as I explained the importance of predators in the ecosystem. Adults remained more skeptical, but even they had begun to acknowledge the benefits of our managed reintroduction program. The amber stone remained on our mantle, used only occasionally when deeper communication was needed. My abilities had strengthened with practice, needing less external focus now. I couldn't transform physically, as some legends suggested, but the mental connection with the wolves had deepened, allowing me to serve as an interpreter between species in ways I was still discovering. As twilight gathered, Soren joined me at the fence, his arms slipping naturally around my waist. Together we watched as Ash initiated the evening howl, his voice now strong and clear, as it rose to join Kaya's deeper tone. One by one, the other wolves added their voices to the chorus. I closed my eyes, letting the sound wash over me. Without the stone, I couldn't hear Kaya's thoughts directly, but I could feel her contentment, her approval of what we'd built together. This place where both wolf and human needs were balanced, where ancient connections were honored, alongside modern conservation science. Happy, Soren asked, pressing a soft kiss to my temple. I leaned into him, watching Ash prance proudly among his adoptive family. The memory of the desperate choice I'd made to save him on that rainy evening, feeling like a lifetime ago. That single act of compassion had cost me my job, but it had given me a purpose. It had pulled me from a world where I'd never truly fit, and led me to one where I was essential. Yes, I answered, turning to meet Soren's kiss, more fully the wolves' song surrounding us like a blessing. I'm exactly where I'm meant to be.